Welcome to the Explainer. So, what if the best way to learn is to do everything you've been told not to do? Today, we're diving into Make It Stick and the science that proves when learning feels hard, well, that's when you're finally doing it right.
You know the scene, right? You're hunched over a textbook, your highlighter's practically bleeding through the page, and you're rereading a chapter for, the third time? We tell ourselves we're studying. But what if I told you that all that hard work might actually be a complete waste of time?
It makes sense, right? We're drawn to things that feel productive, like rereading and highlighting. It gives us this nice, warm feeling of progress. But here's the catch, and this is a big one from the book Make It Stick. That feeling is a trap. The truly effective methods, the ones backed by actual cognitive science, well, they're the ones that feel a lot harder and kind of less productive in the moment.
And that's really the core, kind of disruptive claim of the whole book. For decades, we've just been relying on our gut feelings and what's always been done. Meanwhile, a real science of learning has been quietly proving all of that wrong, offering up strategies that are based on evidence, stuff that actually works.
Okay, so to really get why our old methods are so wrong, we have to tackle the biggest obstacle first. And that obstacle is us. Turns out, we're pretty terrible judges of when we're actually learning anything.
Yes, psychologists have a name for this. They call it the illusion of knowing. Think about it. When you reread a text, it starts to feel familiar and easy, right? Well, that ease, that fluency, it tricks your brain. It gives you this false sense of security. You start thinking, oh yeah, I've got this, when what you really have is just familiarity. And that's not the same as mastery, not even close.
If you want to see this illusion in action, just think about a penny. I mean, you've probably seen thousands of them in your life, but could you, right now, pick the correct one out of a lineup? Most people can't. And it gets better. A study found that professors at UCLA couldn't even point out where the nearest fire extinguisher was to their own office door.
I mean, this just shows it so perfectly, doesn't it? Just being exposed to something, even over and over again, doesn't build a durable memory. It's not carving any new pathways in your brain. So, if just passively looking at stuff fails, what actually works?
Well, the answer is completely counterintuitive. And honestly, it's the core of this entire explainer. The secret to making knowledge stick isn't to find ways to make learning easier. No, it's to make it harder.
Just think of it like going to the gym. A nice, comfortable stroll is fine, but it's not going to build any muscle, right? If you want to get stronger, you need resistance. And it turns out the exact same thing is true for our brains. We have to ditch those easy, comfortable habits and replace them with strategies that create a kind of productive struggle.
And this brings us to this really cool concept called desirable difficulties. Now, these aren't just random roadblocks. They're specific, targeted obstacles that force your brain to work harder, to really dig deep to connect and retrieve information. And that struggle, that's exactly what forges stronger, more durable memories.
There's a quote from the book that just says it all. Learning that's easy is like writing in sand, here today and gone tomorrow. Effortful learning, that's like carving stone. It creates something that lasts. But easy learning, it's just writing in sand. Feels good for a second, but it's gone with the first wave.
Okay, so how do we actually create these desirable difficulties? This sounds a little abstract. Well, the good news is the book gives us a really powerful and practical toolkit. And it all boils down to 3 core evidence-based strategies.
These are pretty much the 3 pillars of effective learning. First up is retrieval, that's pulling information out of your brain. Second is interleaving, mixing up different skills so you learn how to tell them apart. And third is spacing, which is basically letting yourself forget just a little bit so that when you recall it, the memory gets even stronger. Let's break down how these actually work.
Okay, first up, retrieval practice. Just the simple act of trying to recall something strengthens the memory and stops you from forgetting it. Check out this study from a middle school science class. The material students were quizzed on, they scored an A's average. The material they just reviewed over and over, a C+. I mean, that's a huge difference. That's the power of pulling information out of your brain instead of just trying to shove it in.
All right. Second, we've got interleaving. So instead of practicing one thing over and over again, which is called blocked practice, the idea is to mix up different but related skills. For example, in a study with college baseball players, one group practiced hitting just fastballs, then just curveballs in predictable blocks. The other group had the pitches thrown at them randomly, interleaved, And guess what? The interleaved group showed way better long-term performance. Why? Because interleaving forces your brain to learn how to tell the difference between problem types, not just go on autopilot.
And finally, we have spaced practice. This is the sworn enemy of cramming for an exam. See, our brains actually need time to consolidate memories. Take a look at this study with surgical residents. The group that crammed 4 lessons into a single day, they lost most of their skills within a month. Gone. But the group that spaced the exact same lessons out over 4 weeks, they retained them perfectly. That little bit of forgetting that happens between sessions, that's actually the secret sauce. It forces your brain to work harder to reconstruct the memory, and in doing so, makes it so much stronger.
Now, it's really important to get this. These strategies aren't just about memorizing a bunch of facts for a test. They're about building a deep, flexible kind of understanding. You know, the kind of knowledge you can actually use in the real world to solve problems you've never seen before.
And to help build that deeper understanding, we can add 2 more powerful tools to our kit. First is generation. That's the act of trying to solve a problem before anyone shows you the answer. The second is elaboration, which is basically just connecting new ideas to stuff you already know, explaining it in your own words.
The acclaimed writer John McPhee is a perfect example of this. He doesn't just sit around waiting for inspiration to strike. Nope. He describes his first draft as an awful blurting, just this messy, difficult struggle to get the raw ideas down on the page.
And this just completely reframes how we should think about struggle, doesn't it? McPhee's difficulty isn't a sign that he's failing. It's generative learning in action. By wrestling with the problem himself first, he's creating this mental framework, this scaffolding, that the solution can then lock into. And that is a much, much stronger way to learn than just being handed the answer from the start.
Okay, so finally, to really make all of this work, to truly embrace these effortful strategies, there's one last piece of the puzzle we need to put in place. And it has to do with changing how we think about learning itself and realizing that our potential isn't set in stone.
This comes from the incredible work of psychologist Carol Dweck. She showed that what we believe about our own intelligence dramatically shapes how we perform. So if you have a fixed mindset, the belief that your ability is just innate, you're born with it, you'll probably avoid challenges because you see failure as a final judgment on who you are. But if you have a growth mindset, you see effort as the path to getting better, and failure is just useful information, valuable feedback.
And listen, this isn't just some feel-good motivational slogan. This is hard neuroscience. Every time you learn something new, you physically change your brain. It's a process called neuroplasticity. Your intelligence isn't static. It's something you actively build. Every single time you engage in this kind of effortful practice, you are literally, physically rewiring your brain to be more capable.
So here's the real bottom line. Learning isn't something that just happens to you, it's something you do. The power is genuinely in your hands. You can replace those comfortable passive habits with the active, effortful strategies we've talked about, retrieval, spacing, interleaving, and you can take control. So the only question left is, what are you going to do differently tomorrow?